thanks for the introduction. I realize I'm the last speaker, so I stand between your existence here and your freedom to do whatever you're planning to do next. So I'm going to be mindful of that. And I'll try to rush through as concisely as I can. Great presentation, Kurt. And touching on the last point, why people still respond to surveys, sometimes I look at the questionnaires and I'm amazed that people are still responding to surveys. We are grateful to them, the ones who do. But yeah, it's fast getting a challenging space. We need to find better and smarter ways to do stuff. A discussion for some other day. So today I'm here to talk about, so we've touched upon some of the areas that I'm going to probably get into, so it's a great segue. I mean, there was a mention about TVC, trend being the main media back in the days in 80s and 90s, and I mean, if you're living in this age and era, digital and online it's a great deal, right? And while we've come a long way in measuring and come to peace with what we can and we can't with the other traditional media channels, with online it's still evolving. So I'm going to touch upon one area, which is what we've explored in terms of measuring the effectiveness of online ads. Start with the philosophical quote. Yeah. Yeah.
This looks better. Oh, yeah.
All right, so I mean, this is a bit of a philosophical quote, and it is that if a tree falls down, in the midst of a forest, but there is absolutely not a single soul, not a single person who can hear that sound, does it really matter? I mean, does it really make an impact? Putting it in our context, closer to our home base, I mean, likewise, if we serve a digital advert and there is no one who's seen the ad or who's felt the ad, does it really make an impact? Does it even matter? Like, isn't it redundant? I'll further this with one quotation from this illustrious gentleman, John Wanamaker. We've all seen this at some point in time in our career or in our student days. It's amazing, 100 years and this still continues to be relevant. And the point is, we spend a lot. We know a good part of it is wasted, and we still don't know which part of it is wasted. So that brings me to the agenda. I mean, what we're going to talk about today is a number of things. So we'll start with just a quick understanding of advertising research, why online advertising is different in its nuanced way. What is online ad effectiveness, and how are the issues of viewability creeping in, and one of the approaches to sort that out, and we'll get on to the questions in the final bit. Now, advertising research, what is it? It's measuring to the extent to which the ad has been effective, the advertising has been successful in reaching the target audience, in communicating what the ad is supposed to communicate, in persuading the desired behavior. And to measure that, we need to single out the effect of advertising. And it all boils down to keeping it same, so test and control, if you're familiar with that. That's how we measure the effectiveness of a lot of things. Advertising is one of them. So ceteris paribus, which is everything else being the same. What has changed when someone is exposed to an ad, someone is given a communication piece versus not having that. No, it's all great. I mean, it's all hunky-dory in terms of methodology, in terms of approach. But I mean, of course, there are a few challenges. This is how I look when I'm thinking hard. So one, people have recall issues in general. I mean, I can't remember what I saw, what I did 3 weeks back, or even a couple of weeks back. All the more relevant in this day and age because we are cluttered with messages. I mean, we see a lot more messages, a lot more stuff around us in a given day than we did probably decades back. Case of mistaken identity. So people often confuse, something that they haven't seen, or they mix it up with something else that they have seen in some other space. So that happens all the time. I mean, how many times do we collect a survey data where people say they've seen this ad and then they start describing it, and it has nothing to do with what the actual ad was about. And then, I mean, there's also the whole challenge of persuasion. So a lot of people feel they are not impacted by advertising, they think they are beyond it. And so again, we don't know in any of these cases, either of these cases, we don't know if a person has actually been exposed to an ad or not. We are still relying on them to recall and to portray what they saw, they didn't see. Now this brings us to an important point, and this is kind of also a very hot topic in the area of online advertising, which is opportunity to see. So OTS, as it's called in the industry parlance. Now, one of the things with OTS is if you consume a media platform, it's already implying consumption of the advertising. And you have at least an opportunity to see. I mean, if you're watching the TV at the right time, at the right channel, then it's considered an OTS. Whether you've seen the ad or not, itself doesn't matter, but you count it as an OTS. If you read magazine X or magazine Y, and if the ad is placed in there, it's considered an OTS, and so on and so forth. And these things, again, they are a lot memory-based, they are a lot simplified, and they have some issues, which is what we are going to get into. Now, in terms of online itself, it's different on multiple fronts. I mean, there are a number of things which makes it stand out. So one is the nature of media, the nature of the channels within online, and then the nature of execution, the kind of stuff you do and you can do within online research. To give you an example, so you have a TVC. A TVC does what it does, and then you have a direct mailer which elicits response, whereas TVC is more visual and animation based in a brand building. Direct mailer is supposed to be more tactical and more eliciting response. Now, the beauty and the challenges with online, you can do a combination of what these do and probably a bit more than that. And you can also isolate, and you can also do exactly, you can replicate a TVC, you can replicate a direct mailer, you can fuse them together. So this makes online that much harder, and the point being, I mean, if it has the measurable element, so at some point we want to get mastery over measuring, and we want to get a finer grip on measuring the effectiveness. Now, this gentleman, Briggs, has tried addressing the first ever case study that was made on online ad effectiveness. This was way back in 1996. Where he talks about banner ads not being just pop-up direct mailer kind of ads, but to be looked at as more branding and visual oriented. And things have changed a lot. But then, I mean, this was the first attempt, the first dig at online effectiveness. Now, the nature of online media, again, we are familiar with it. So there's a lot of variance depending on the time of the day, the location, the context, and the position you're using your online access for. To further it, for instance, you're looking at two very popular online channels on internet, Facebook and say Wikipedia, or Google or Yahoo for that matter. A lot of these things do similar stuff, but then the context in which you'll be using one or the other, it's quite different. They're both online, they're both accessing people, they're both interactive, but then the way and the reason for which you'd use them would be completely different. So you've got to bear this in mind as well. I mean, when we do our online advertising, and that's an area where I think the industry's gone a lot ahead. Like the planning is top notch these days. Now, Another challenge is you could have the same website being viewed by two people simultaneously, and they could be looking at two different ads. So one could be seeing a page that looks like this, the other person would look at exact same page but with a KLM ad popping up, which the other person. So that's also to illustrate the dynamic nature that online is. So now the unique challenge that this brings, or this furthers, is again the recall of channel is impossible. The recall of page within channel, my God, like no one's going to remember what page on a particular website is so what. The time of recall again with our constant access to internet via multiple devices, cross devices, multi-screening that Kurt mentioned about. It's hard to locate where you saw something or where you visited something. So being present in the channel on the time, or even for that matter, even on the same page, doesn't really guarantee exposure. So one thing's clear, consumption of media is not exactly opportunity to see when it comes to online. Now, we've been doing this for a long time. Let's see if anyone knows when did we start measuring formally online ad effectiveness. Any guesses? Any takers?
What's the price?
No price. You get my good wishes. Alright, I'll cut it. So it's 1996. It started. The whole online advertising started evolving. I mean, things started getting more formally savvier. So it started with cookies in ad. Then there were pop-ups. Then there were pop-ups had these pop-up killers because they were annoying and they were interfering with people's access. Then again, I mean, cookies have come back in new form and new shape. Now it's all permission based. And again, I mean, things will come and go, things will keep evolving. But the point is, we've been chasing the technology for a while, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So anyways, with all that background and all that said, one of the things is we still have a challenge on hand. We still spend a significant amount of money on digital advertising. And we are still looking for ways to measure what it has or it hasn't done for us. So using cookie in a panel. So as a company, for instance, we have reached to over 17 million respondents across the world who are based in our response or market research survey panels. Now, increasingly, we are cooking a lot of these panelists. We are dropping cookies every time they visit our page, or they take a survey, or they interact with us. And this is cross-device. By dropping a cookie with permission, it gives us something that we can use as a hook in the later stages, where we start tying that with online ads they've been exposed to or not, to understand who exactly are the target audiences that saw that particular digital ad. How many unique users, and also gets us over the response rate problem, because we are not asking them about recall, we already know if they've seen it or if they haven't. So there's a lot of passive data that's there to be captured. So just by capturing information on our panelists who've been exposed, we get a lot of demographics and basic information without even having to talk to them or without even having to ask them. But beyond that, again, you can run the control and test surveys where you can ask people who've seen the ad, and you can ask people who haven't seen the ad, and you can validate if there is any significant difference in opinion about brand disposition or brand preferences or whatever you have. Now again, this is great, but we still have one problem, and now this problem is, so even if an ad is displayed on a page, the crux of it is it in the viewable screen? And this is not a brand or it's not a marketer problem. This is the inherent problem of the nature of the media as it is. So I found this number pretty disturbing. This comes from the Internet Advertising Bureau, and it says 54% of all digital advertising isn't seen. So that's quite disturbing, which means, I mean, even after doing all the things right, being on the right page at the right time, getting the right person, you could still be off limits in terms of viewability. And if you're not viewable, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you are in the non-scrollable part, or in the part where people haven't scrolled down the page, how does it matter whether you are there as an ad or as a brand or not? this is a large issue plaguing the online advertising world. So viewability, again, even that has further complications. So one is being viewable. The second one is were you sufficiently viewable? So I could have spotted something for like half a second before it disappears, and that's meaningless. I mean, that's as good as having seen. So you can put threshold measures on, at least 1 second or 3 seconds or 5 seconds, and whatever you think is the right amount of threshold for viewability before you can start internalizing the measure. So the viewable impression measure was introduced to counter and to get over this. Like, I mean, it has to be meaningful. It has to be sufficiently viewable, and it helps answer why some of the post-campaign metrics between the test and the control group might not differ as much as we would like it to, because probably people have been exposed. It's just not been in the viewable zone, and that's as good as not being exposed. Now, so we have this technique which allows us, like I said, we can set viewability threshold parameters, and we can actually define if a person has seen in at least 50% or in a 30%. Again, this is scalable. We can decide what the threshold should be, and for at least whether a certain period of time, which is typically in seconds. So the point is, you want to get hold of the audience, which is about the fold. People who've seen that as a truly exposed audience, and then in the traditional, we just take anyone who's remotely, in a way just close enough, has been counted as exposed, whereas now you can go to a pinpoint level of accuracy. Now, how do we do it? So, like I said, the SSI panelists, we've gained consent to be cookied. It's still it's only a part of our panel, not every single person, but it's growing as we speak. We are adding markets, we are adding more panelists, and of course, we have to do it the right way, which is we have to gain the consent and we have to let them know what they're in for, and then it helps us further the ad tracking product that we have that we're going to talk about. Now, once the SSI panelist has been tagged, so let's say you're all the panelists, you've all been tagged, the second thing is when the online campaign is being developed, we put a pixel, we tag the campaign. So that tag coincides with those of you who come across the ad, and it picks you out as someone who's been exposed to the ad. So that's in a simple way, that's what it does. And once it does that, so we get an idea, like I said, even before we get into a survey, we know what kind of people have seen. So my campaign was supposed to be for females in a certain age group, and I know that, the ones who picked up that ad from my panel, they either fit or they don't fit. So it tells me whether my audience reach was accurate and was meaningful enough to start with. And then, of course, you get a whole load of viewability and impressions and those measures, which is passive, and some of this is beyond the panel. Like, it doesn't even have to be just panel based. In doing so, we provide a dashboard to the customer, so you can look at these things. Again, real-time information is absolutely critical. This allows you to monitor some of these things on a real-time basis and make decisions on the fly. Before I get into a bit more of that, just to give you a background, so it's not just us who's doing this. We've partnered with a company called DMA Institute, who's based in Netherlands, and they aren't the only technology providers who provide this whole cookie technology and the tagging and data dashboard. We scouted for a number of options, but they came through pretty strongly, given their compliance and their ability to tick a lot of boxes. So yeah, that's a shout out for DMA Institute, who's been seamlessly helping us in the back end, and they have their independent technology and their value that they bring, which fuses with our panel and effectively has created this product. So measuring true ad effectiveness, it's again, I mean, it's a lot to do with, it's not just exposure. You want to look at what's the difference between creatives, between formats, between placement positions. You're looking at, targeting audience insight, so again, you can survey people, and, you can tie that with the other passive measures that you've collected. You can measure decay rate, so you can start looking at putting quotas on people who've been exposed to the ad and need to be surveyed within a certain span of time so they don't lose the messaging recall. And again, you can look at frequency and a whole lot of other measures which can be supplemented with things like awareness, consideration, and so on. That comes from a typical traditional survey. So you're looking at digital metrics, impressions, placements, and all that. You tie that with survey results, and it gives you a more holistic picture and tells you in a more crystallized, pinpoint way whether your ad was really effective. So live dashboard is something the clients who are working with this value a lot, because one of the things is with digital, if you get real-time information, you can start tweaking your ads on the fly. So as you learn, you can start making the improvements. This is, so my apologies, the picture isn't very clear, but then this covers a lot of passive measures like I mentioned earlier, so demographics, viewable impressions, what was the span of time people spent viewing, how much of it was viewable, was it 30%, 50%, and then we can supplement that within the same dashboard. We can look at things like what kind of likelihood it induced in people who saw the ad, what kind of awareness it brought about, and the usual stuff that we get from a traditional survey. So in short, what we're doing is there is a piece of technology that allows us to tag and use cookies and get to someone who's actually seen the ad or not seen the ad, and collect information on the fly without even talking to them, and then if needed, supplement that with a traditional survey and make it a whole. So instead of relying on your recall, or you think you've seen the ad, you thought this was the ad that you saw in a certain place, here we are actually getting down to the right person. So we are skipping that whole recall-based challenges that we have with ad effectiveness measures, which is what 95% of ad effectiveness measure as it stands today is purely based on loosely put guesswork, right? We are trying to get people to recall and just say that, okay, I've seen the ad and this is what I think and so on. So in summary, online advertising measurement, it's going to continue. This is not the last stop by far. There's still a lot of challenges. So one of the challenges we have with this is we are constrained by the panel size, and it has to be sufficiently large impression for your campaign so that we can find a coinciding point between the panelists who are on the panel and if they've seen the ad in real life. So that's going to continue to evolve with cookies and with these things, because there's also a lot of privacy laws involved. So it's going to shift and keep changing forms as things go along. Viewability is a crucial measure. It remains so. So I think we've gone beyond those days when it was just buying impressions, and impressions meant a lot. Impressions mean nothing, as we've seen. If 54% of my advertising isn't seen, what good is an impression? It really doesn't matter. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's a critical. To have that viewability measure, to have that transparency, it's absolutely critical. I'd say it should be almost mandatory. As marketers, as planners, as insights people, you need to know if someone has really seen the ad and has been served the ad or not. Multiple devices remains a challenge, so we have gone across a few stages with the online ad effectiveness product that we have. So now we can measure in-app ads as well as the ones in videos, the ones in YouTube, for instance. But then again, there are certain domains which still remain out of bounds. Like with Facebook, we need to work with special permissions, or if it's tightly controlled media, like in China, you have a lot of those problems. And finally, the success is not just, it's not about SSI or any panel company for that matter. It has to be backed with the right amount of technology and someone with the know-how from the digital world. In this case, we believe we have selected someone who's a first-class technology partner, and that adds and that helps with the success. So that's about it from me today. Yeah, thank you.
For your presentation. I think one question, and I give a prize, personal invite to the next breakfast seminar here in Jakarta. But the breakfast seminar is named Digital Indonesia, so you have time after the one question to connect directly with the speakers. So it's challenging because you need to think whom to ask and what to ask. Oh!
What are the objections, or what are the difficulties you've had in trying to sell a new insight community concept to clients, given that you have several and you've tried to sell it, but it's not gaining as much traction in Asia as it is in other markets. So what are the main objections?
The fear of change is the main objection. So as we don't get too many objections, people like the idea of insight communities. People seem to understand what we're trying to achieve. But the problem is it's a change in research buyers' jobs, essentially, because traditionally at the beginning of the year, you've got a budget of, let's say, $500,000. You're going to do your continuous tracking, you're going to do your Nielsen audit, you're going to do some product tests, you're going to do some concept development work, you're going to do a UNA, and then you're done. So you know at the beginning of the year what you're going to be doing. Now the idea, and a few focus groups as well to boot, but the idea of being more reactive and proactive depending on what your customers are telling you and working directly just with your customers. Nobody's saying you shouldn't do the other research as well, but working directly with your customers in a different way, I think there's a fear. And often, just to be frank as well, sometimes it's difficult to get in front of the real decision makers, because often the heads of research function, they might be reporting to a CMO, who in turn is reporting to a CEO, and in order to fundamentally change how insights are gathered, it's difficult for people to sign off on. So you've got to get in front of the right person and talk to them in the right way. People like them, but it is a shift. It's a change.
Yeah, and the follow-up question is that I've heard that those organisations who buy into the insight community concept, maybe because it sucks in all the budget, some say that when organisations adopt insight communities, they forget about the non-customers. So you're only doing research among existing customers who are often plaudits of the brand or the product, and they're forgetting about the non-customers. So are they neglecting the new business in the process?
Yeah, well, there's an argument that if you understand what your current customers like and what motivates your current customers, you will know how to attract new customers. So that can be the case. However, we need to always talk about engaging with customers. The example I showed there with the Mighty community, with that video, Mighty's been in Indonesia now for 6 or 7 years, but through OEMs, not branded. So they're coming into the market here and they're launching the brand, they're growing the brand. So actually the members you saw there, and they've got over 1,000 members here now, none of them are customers. So you can actually have an insight community with category participants rather than necessarily your own customers. We do advocate customer-based, but you can have split samples. You can have a community of customers and a community of non-customers, skinned a little bit differently, branded a little bit differently, and you can work with both. So it doesn't need to be exclusively with customers, although we do hold a belief that talking to customers is the best way to be able to build your brand.
Okay, thank you. I would like to bring this seminar to an end, and I would like to thank you again for your time attending today's breakfast seminar. I would like to thank our speakers from BDRC Asia, Aristo, Dini, and Piers. I would like to thank Kurt from ABN Impact and Mani from SSI. Please connect after the breakfast seminar to show them that it is worth to sponsor the Asia Research Breakfast Seminar. Sekali lagi, terima kasih semuanya. Thank you for joining us today and have a pleasant day ahead. And I hope we see you again at our next Asia Research Breakfast Seminar here in Indonesia.